A Canada-based mother says she fell asleep in a hospital bed during labor, only to wake up as nurses searched for a heartbeat they could no longer find. But the reason they could not find it was not what anyone in the room first feared. According to Carolina Moreno, her baby had already been born, quietly, under the blankets, while everyone around her missed the delivery itself. That is the detail that made Moreno's story spread so quickly. Not just that she slept through part of labor, but that the moment after the birth began with confusion instead of celebration. Her newborn son, she says, was discovered face down under the blankets several minutes later, not crying at first, as she and the nurse realized the baby was no longer inside her body. For verified human interest updates without the rumors, subscribe to Startline Entertainment. The latest confirmed update is that Moreno's baby boy is now 3 months old and, according to her interview with People, was born in perfect health. Moreno described him as calm, easygoing, and absolutely amazing. But she also said the birth itself left her traumatized because the first seconds after realizing what had happened were filled with fear. Moreno is 27, a mother of 3, and lives in Canada. She shares her children with her husband, Jorge Carrera. In her account, the delivery happened during an induction. She said she had tested positive for Group B strep, often called GBS, and that meant she needed antibiotics during labor before her water was broken. That part of the story is important because it explains why the hospital team was moving carefully before pushing the labor forward. After several hours, Moreno said nurses broke her water and started Pitocin, a medication commonly used to stimulate labor contractions. She recalled feeling extremely uncomfortable and said the baby was not in an ideal position, so she requested an epidural. At first, she said the epidural did not seem to be working the way she expected. She pressed the button for additional dosing several times before finally becoming comfortable enough to rest. That is when the story changed. Moreno says she drifted off to sleep while her husband, sister, and cousin were in the room. While she slept, nurses continued checking the baby's heartbeat. She told People the fetal monitor alarm had gone off more than once because the baby was very active and would move around. At first, that did not seem alarming to her. She believed the monitor had simply lost track again, the way it had before. But as the nurse continued trying to find the heartbeat, Moreno began to wake up more fully. She says the minutes started to feel different. The nurse was still looking. The heartbeat was still not showing up where it was expected to be, and for a mother in labor, that kind of silence can quickly turn into panic. Moreno remembered asking whether she should lie on her back. The nurse agreed. Then, as Moreno adjusted her legs, she felt something on the bed. In that instant, her mind did not go to the idea that she had already delivered. She said she thought something terrible had happened. She feared it might be the placenta or something wrong with her body or worse. Then the nurse lifted the blanket. According to Moreno, her baby boy was there, face down, under the blankets. He was not crying. He was not where anyone expected him to be, and because nobody in the room had realized the birth had already happened, the moment that should have announced his arrival instead became a frantic discovery. Moreno said the nurse immediately picked up the baby and began rubbing him. She was screaming. Her husband, she recalled, thought he had somehow missed the birth, but Moreno put it more sharply. Everyone had missed it. The baby had arrived while she was asleep. What makes the story so gripping is also what makes it important to tell carefully. Moreno's account is public, and People interviewed her directly, but the hospital has not been publicly identified in the report. And there is no public hospital statement confirming the sequence independently. That means the public version of the story should be framed as Moreno's account of what happened, not as a completed medical investigation. Still, the medical context helps explain why the moment felt so frightening. In labor, nurses often monitor a baby's heart rate to check how the baby is tolerating contractions. If a monitor stops detecting the heartbeat, one possibility is that the baby has moved or the monitor has shifted. But for a parent in the room, the emotional effect can be immediate. Moreno says she started to think something horrible had happened because no one knew the baby had already been delivered. After the nurse stimulated him, Moreno says the baby cried. That cry changed everything. It was the sound that told the room he was alive. But Moreno said even after that, she struggled to process that he was okay. The fear had come first, and the relief took longer to catch up. Looking back, Moreno said the baby turned out to be calm by nature. She described him as a baby who falls asleep easily and does not cry much. In her words, that calm personality now makes sense to her in hindsight, but in the delivery room, when he was face down and quiet under the blankets, it was terrifying. There is another reason the story has connected with so many viewers. Birth stories are usually remembered as a sequence of intense moments: the contractions, the final push, the cry, the announcement, the first look. Moreno says she missed the actual moment of birth because she was asleep. That left her with a complicated memory, relief that her baby was healthy, but also grief and shock over a delivery she did not consciously experience. The viral reaction has focused on the strangeness of the moment, but Moreno's own framing is more serious. She has said she is thankful everything worked out, and she specifically thanked the nurse who responded when the baby was found. That detail matters. Moreno is describing fear and trauma, but she is not publicly presenting the story as a simple blame narrative. She has emphasized how grateful she is that her son survived and is doing well. The Group B strep detail also deserves clarity. GBS is a type of bacteria that can be carried without causing illness in the pregnant person, but it can be dangerous for newborns if transmitted during delivery. That is why medical guidelines commonly call for screening in pregnancy and antibiotics during labor when someone tests positive. In Moreno's telling, that is why antibiotics were part of her induction process, before her water was broken. Pitocin is another piece of the timeline. It is a synthetic form of oxytocin used in labor settings to start or strengthen contractions when clinically appropriate. Moreno said she received it after her water was broken. That does not by itself explain everything that happened later, and it would be irresponsible to claim it caused the unusual birth moment. In her public account, it is simply part of the sequence of care she described. The epidural is the part viewers are most likely to focus on, because Moreno herself joked in her TikTok caption that it was definitely too strong, but that is her personal description of how the experience felt. Public reporting does not include a medical review of her epidural dosing, anesthesia records, or a clinician's explanation of what happened. So the safest way to say it is this: Moreno believes the epidural played a role in how deeply she slept, but the available public reporting does not prove exactly why she slept through the delivery. What is confirmed publicly is narrower, but still remarkable. Moreno says she was induced, received antibiotics after testing positive for GBS, had her water broken, was given Pitocin, requested an epidural, fell asleep, and later woke as nurses searched for the baby's heartbeat. She says the baby was then discovered under the blankets after he had already been born, and she says he is now healthy. The startling takeaway is that this story should not be treated like a medical mystery, with all the answers already known. It is a mother's account of a frightening delivery moment that ended well, but it also raises questions that only the medical team and patient records could fully answer. The public should not assume negligence, a medication error, or a diagnosis from a viral clip. The verified center of the story is the family's relief, the baby's health, and Moreno's honest description of how frightening the discovery felt. For now, Carolina Moreno's son is healthy, the story has gone viral, and the reason it is spreading is not just because the birth was unusual. It is because for several minutes everyone in the room feared the worst until they realized the baby they were searching for had already arrived.